He did conduct a variety of tests on the hulk USS America in 2005. Those tests, which may have involved underwater charges, of the sort that damaged USS Cole, did not result in America's sinking. She was scuttled in the wake of the process. The short answer is that no one knows how many modern torpedoes a US carrier could take before sinking, but we can estimate with little doubt that even a single torpedo would cause extensive damage, and severely impede operations. Much smaller ships have survived such hits, as have civilian tankers similar in size to CVN-78. Nevertheless, even a non-fatal cruise missile hit would probably result in severe damage to the flight deck, impeding or completely stopping flight operations. The most important development in carrier-killing technology over the last decade has been the anti-ship ballistic missile, ASBM. The Chinese DF-21 has the potential to strike American carriers from heretofore unrealizable ranges, and threatens to penetrate existing defense systems. The missile can maneuver in its terminal phase, targeting a moving carrier on a high-velocity final approach. The kinetic energy alone of the weapon could inflict devastating damage on a flight deck, putting a carrier out of action if not sinking it entirely. The development of the DF-21 has forced the U.S. Navy to significantly step up its ballistic missile defense efforts. However, the ability of a U.S. task force to manage a large barrage of ASBMs is in great question. More than anything else, the development of the ASBM has forced the U.S. Navy to reconsider the role of the carrier in high-intensity warfare. The new Ford-class carriers cost somewhere around $13 billion, a price that does not include the air wing. With a contingent of F-35CS, F/A-18EFs and various support aircraft, the price of an individual carrier is simply staggering, and the numbers go higher when accounting for the escort group that a carrier requires. Although the per-unit cost will go down as more ships are acquired, the Fords take so long to build that each new ship will need to incorporate a host of new technologies, just as with the Nimitz class. The tolerance for large defense expenditure in the United States has varied considerably over the past 3 decades. The Trump administration has combined a fondness for increased spending with the grand strategy of retrenchment, an odd pairing. If retrenchment takes hold, then generating enthusiasm for defense spending may become increasingly difficult. And at some point, the military utility of an aircraft carrier may become literally irrelevant, relative to the cost of building, maintaining and effectively deploying the ship and its air wing. Maybe China and Russia don't need to kill a carrier to drive the species to extinction. All of the factors above, the weapon systems that can kill carriers, and the costs associated with the ships themselves, come together to create caution about how to use the ships. In the event of a conflict, U.S. Navy admirals and the U.S. President may
since 2013, should become operational in 2020. China's recent naval modernization has raised eyebrows in the Pacific and globally, as China ignores international law, builds and militarizes artificial islands in the South China Sea, and threatens and bullies its neighbors. See how China's aircraft carriers stack up to other carriers worldwide. So far, little is known of China's new carrier, which is known only as the Type 001A. It will take years of sea trials and practice to develop it into a fully functioning carrier. As it stands, there are most likely U.S. Navy pilots with about as many carrier landings and takeoffs as the entire Chinese Navy. The carrier will field an enhanced S-band radar and a reconfigured island, or the tower on top of the main deck. The new deck will allow the Type 001A to accommodate more aircraft, as UZ News reports. The Soviet style of carrier, which Russia and China still use, has a different purpose than the US's flat-top carriers. Instead of being a truly global strike carrier, These carriers make more sense for coastal defense. Over the past 4 years, China's People's Liberation Army Navy has had to build up carrier operations from nothing. It has never operated an aircraft carrier, so it faced a steep learning curve. The Leaning launches planes off a ski jump style deck because it lacks the catapults that U.S. carriers have. This means the J-15 Flying Shark aircraft that take off from the Leaning or the Type 001A can't carry as much fuel or as many bombs as the U.S.'s carrier-based planes can. This greatly limits their range and effectiveness in combat. But while the planes must travel light, the Leaning and the Type 001A boast heavy arsenals of their own. The Admiral Kuznetsov, which the Leaning and to some degree the Type 001A are based on, was Russia's sole aircraft carrier. The ships have the same size and speed, and they both feature the ski jump platform. The Kuznetsov, which carried out its first combat deployment in the Mediterranean bolstering the Syrian regime in 2016, has a troubled past plagued with mechanical difficulties. Everywhere it sails, a tugboat accompanies it in case it breaks down, as was the case in 2012. China's southern neighbor India operates 2 smaller aircraft carriers with a third in production, but they are more reliable. In 2014, the Leaning experienced unexpected power failures while at sea. China's eastern neighbor Japan has smaller helicopter destroyers, or flat-deck carriers that sport helicopters and short or vertical takeoff aircraft as well as heavy armaments and missiles. But Japan has a trick up its sleeve. It recently launched a larger class of helicopter carrier, the Izumo class.
In fact, the new Chinese ship looks very similar to that class. The design means the ships have the advantage of a wider deck to operate more aircraft. This frigate design has a 2-door hangar for helicopters and vertical takeoff landing, VTOL, unmanned aircraft systems, U.S. Trimarans can also reach higher speeds, due to the reduced drag of having 3 hulls instead of a single wider one. For a trimaran, the Chinese frigate is heavily armed, with a 76mm turret, 1632 vertical launching system cells, 2 close-in weapon systems, quays, and 8 heavy anti-ship missile launchers, all within stealthy superstructure. The Chinese trimaran frigate will be about 465 feet long, and has a beam of 105 feet and a weight of 2,450 tons. Interestingly, it may be the first Chinese warship to use an integrated electrical propulsion system, (EEPS), to provide the power for driving its 3 pump jets. It is unclear if the announced 2,450-ton displacement is full or light. If we're comparing the vessel to the USS Independence subclass of the littoral combat ship, the latter is designed as a high-speed platform, with a top speed estimated at 50 knots, which is faster than the Chinese trimaran frigate's announced 30-35 knot top speed. The Chinese trimaran frigate is far more heavily armed for conventional warfare. The American ship mounts only a 57mm cannon plus provisions for anti-ship missiles, while the Chinese ship boasts the capacity for a 76mm cannon, anti-ship missiles, and vertical launching system cells for carrying anti-ship, land attack crews and anti-air missiles. That being said, the USS Independence offers the flexibility of changing out mission modules, such as between anti-submarine and mine countermeasure missions. This flexibility may be overstated, however, as both trimaran designs have wide decks for intensive helicopter operations, and the Chinese version also appears to have ample cargo spaces to embark maritime special forces and unmanned surface and underwater systems. The trimaran frigate has room for 2 helicopter hangars, which hold multi-role helicopter and unmanned aircraft systems for mine countermeasure missions, attacks, transportation, and search and rescue missions. If built, the trimaran frigate would provide the plan with a high-speed, heavily armed warship for littoral operations in the East and South China Seas. It would likely serve as a complement to smaller Type 02. This one, which recently won China's National Science and Technology Progress Award, is small enough to fit on a lab workbench, making it theoretically portable enough for land vehicles and aircraft. Said another way, it's small enough to be convenient, but powerful enough to totally down enemy electronics. A microwave weapon like this could even be fitted to a missile, like the US CHAMP electronic warfare missile, or drone. Generally, microwave weapons shut down electronic systems, even those with traditional shielding against EMP, by bombarding the target with energy pulses between 300 and 300,000 MHz. This amount of directed energy interferes with and overloads electronic circuits, causing them to shut down. The higher the energy produced by the system, the greater the disruption, and even physical damage for some very high-powered microwave weapons, of the targeted electronic systems like engines and communications systems. China can find a wide variety of uses for an electronics killing ray. Defensively, microwave weapons could be part of electronic warfare booby traps, ambushing and disabling enemy vehicles and robots. At close ranges, it can be mounted on vehicles, warships, and even aircraft, to disable and distract missiles, small UAVs and even the personal and vehicular electronics of Dong, who received 4 national awards for his research. He discussed the model in a number of Chinese television reports and was reportedly still working on the details when he died in January 2016. Despite his death, 2 major concepts shot by Dong live on, and may pave the way for future warships. One potential vessel is a fully submersible cruiser known as the high-speed wave-piercing vehicle with wings. The fast-moving vessel was mentioned as far back as 2009 by the National Natural Science Foundation of China, a state-run research institution. The report described the vessel as operating in several different modes, including submerged, semi-submerged and surface planning, with the ability to change its sailing mode quickly and directly. After Dong's death, another renowned Chinese scientist, A.Y. Ming, took on a similar project thought to be based on Dong's design, according to the French military blog East Pendulum. This other vision is essentially an arsenal ship that leaves most of its hull submerged, reducing detection by radar and retaining a formidable payload of weapons capable of performing within a combat radius of more than 620 miles. References to the research and development of such submergible arsenal ships can be found on many Chinese forums, and also have appeared on government websites. The ship is briefly described in an April 2016 post appearing on the Wuhan Science and Technology Bureau's official website. 2 Chinese universities, the Wuhan University of Science and Technology and Huazhong University of Science Systems, SIS. This follows the 206 institutes hosting of the 7th Chinese Electromagnetic Technology Conference in October 2015, which also reported advances in material sciences to reduce railgun barrel wear. While railgun technology have been tested since 1918, power generation and the wearing out of the barrel are long-standing barriers to the deployment of militarily useful railguns. Chinese researchers have made breakthroughs in electromagnetic aircraft launch systems, EMLs, and railguns, in areas from power storage to tougher barrel materials. EMLs catapults could be installed on Chinese aircraft carriers in the next decade, improving the performance of Chinese naval aircraft. The Phoenix TV broadcast also suggested that the plan hopes to test its own operational railgun in the next couple of years. Despite long-standing public conceptions of China only developing copycat weapons aided by intellectual property theft and espionage, such as the F-35 and J-31 fighter jet similarity, China's progress in developing new cutting-edge military technologies like railguns actually reflects a deep investment in the field. Chinese scientists from civilian and military universities submitted the most papers at the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers' 2014 Symposium on Electromagnetic Launch in California, and China will host the upcoming 2016 symposium as well. The likely use of the reported railgun in a close-in weapons systems, SIS, would be to defend Chinese warships and bases against not just conventional airplanes and missiles, but also hypersonic and ballistic missiles. But China's recent progress in railgun technology also points to their potential in the same long-range fight role the U.S. Navy envisions, covered in the recent book Ghost Fleet. There have been online rumors that suggest that the second batch of Type 055 guided missile destroyers, potentially to be termed the Type 055A, following the naming pattern, will be armed with large railguns in the place of older 130mm cannons, for long-range anti-surface and air defense warfare. The putative Type 055A destroyer class would likely be launched after 2020, and feature integrated electrical propulsion, for increased power generation. Russian design, and the threat environment is complicated by unconventional technologies such as Russian-made anti-ship missiles camouflaged as commercial shipping containers. The U.S. Standard Missile 6 ASCM variant, which may be deployed before 2020, has less range than its Chinese counterparts. China's military development cooperation with Russia, and fielding of the 055 destroyer, will fuel already existing incentives for conventional first strike options, political tension and an arms race with the US, Japan, South Korea, Australia, Indonesia, and India. The arms race and tensions will hurt each country's economic growth and international trade, as well as increase the risk of military conflict. As military technology gets more sophisticated, a naval arms race in Asia will lead to military systems on hair-trigger alerts. The danger is that, as in World War II with Japan, China could one day calculate a military advantage to striking first with an array of air, sea, and rocket-delivered conventional weapons that could debilitate U.S. Navy vessels in the Pacific, as well as other regional U.S. bases. China is prepared to do so, at least in the South China Sea. According to Captain James Fainell, U.S.N.RET, former Director of Intelligence for U.S. Pacific Fleet, China has since 2015 adopted a man-to-man, rather than zonal, defense against U.S. Navy ships that traverse those international waters. China's trend towards shadowing U.S. ships in the East China Sea is the same, according to Fainell, so we should assume that U.S. destroyers and cruisers that have been highly vulnerable over the past 2 years, and until at least 2021 when a subsonic U.S. ship-based ASCM will be fielded. A Chinese conventional first strike against U.S. military forces in Asia is now technically plausible, and backed by China's consistently preemptive naval, missile and cyber doctrines. This gives an incentive to the US to itself strike first, especially if Chinese nuclear retaliation is calculated as unlikely. Such preemptive strikes, by either side, would lead to major power military conflict that would start with multiple nuclear powers, rather than end with one nuclear power as did World War II. It would be the most destructive war in world history. And so military technologies such as China's 055 destroyer armed with YJ-18 ASCM that upset the balance of power in Asia are profoundly destabilizing and contrary to what one should expect from a status quo power. Such technologies are therefore ultimately counter to China's broader commercial and security interests. According to Fainell, U.S. Navy warship anti-ship cruise missile programs are just now being developed. Fainell said, and how long will it be before RASM or SM-6 numbers reach the numbers the PRC already has with the YJ-18? We appear to be behind the power curve for what could be a rather long time, just as the PRC begins to consolidate its territorial claims in the maritime domain of the South and East China Seas over the next decade. Fainell has long argued for increased U.S. naval spending. The 055 competes directly with the U.S. Navy's Arleigh Burke-class destroyers and Ticonderoga cruisers, which are the main delivery system for naval surface combatant firepower globally. The Ticonderoga-class cruisers currently have 16 operational ships and 6 undergoing refurbishment at any given time. There are 62 Arleigh Burkes worldwide, and the U.S. Navy is building 14 more. They are smaller and carry less firepower than the 055s. The Arleigh Burke destroyers displace 8,000 to 10,000 tons and have up to 96 VLS launch tubes each. That is a lot of potential firepower. But what debilitates the Arleigh Burke destroyers is their reliance on 8 Harpoon ASM tubes each, the range of which is limited to only 67 nautical miles compared with the YJ-18's 290 nanometers range. Harpoon missiles do not fit into VLS tubes. According to naval analysts, some of the US destroyers in Asia do not even carry their full complement of Harpoon ASMs, and since 1999, the Arleigh Burkes have not had any Harpoon launchers installed. Most US destroyers, therefore, have only token anti-ship capabilities, making them vulnerable to